stretch of land at the junction of the Little Popoja River and the Popoja River bordering the high open plains of central Wyoming was the subject of a homestead application filed in 1890 by Canadian-born George Andrew Rogers. By 1891, he and his new wife, Emma Hudson Rogers from Salt Lake City, Utah, began the process of improving their claim, and within a year, had built a home on the land and started a family. By all accounts, Emma and George became part of the county community, with George being a member of fraternal orders and serving as county commissioner for 2 years for the Lyons region. In August of 1896, their destinies shifted. George, despondent, committed suicide at the Hotel Fremont in Lander after 3 days of gambling. He left a note to Emma stating he was not of suitable character to be raising a family and leaving her their 3 children. Emma was alone with her sons, a 5-year-old, a 17-month-old, and a 7-month-old. Emma did not flee as many widows would have. Instead, she continued to make improvements to the land in preparation for filing a deed of title. And she partnered with her brothers, Fred N. Hudson and Daniel Frost Hudson, to keep the property. In 1898, Daniel's new wife, Adelaide Cooper, joined the partnership. Thus, the seeds for the town of Hudson were sown. Welcome to the Rediscover the Winds podcast, a podcast by the Fremont County Museums. With museums in Du Bois, Riverton, and Lander, the Fremont County Museum System is committed to collecting, preserving, and interpreting the stories of Fremont County and the Wind River area. The unique artifacts found at our museums relate the history of central Wyoming with information which, in many cases, can't be found anywhere else. With the Rediscover the Winds podcast, we hope to bring some of that history to you, wherever you are listening. Last episode, we talked about the history of railroad ties in Fremont County. We looked at how the Wyoming Tie and Timber Company was able to produce decades of successful tie drives down the Wind River. We explored the technology involved, how the industry changed over time, and the lives of the tie hacks who were crucial to the success of the company. This episode will explore the story of the town of Hudson. Fred Hudson and his family built a new home for themselves on the property, and once Daniel and Adelaide married, Emma's home was split into 2 living spaces, with she and her 3 boys on one side and Daniel and Adelaide on the other. The Hudsons made their living on Emma's piece of land by working in the farming and sheep industry. Brother Fred managed up to 2,000 sheep that they owned, while brother Daniel was the farmer. Daniel at one time had a contract to supply Fort Washakie with potatoes, onions, and fresh pork, butchering up to 15 hogs at a time for delivery in his 4-horse wagon. He also raised field peas to fatten the hogs along with barley, wheat, and sugar beets. This was all prior to 1905. Concurrent to George Rogers filing his homestead application in 1890, coal was on the minds of many in the region. Apparently known from the earliest days of white settlers and probably the local Native American people, coal veins were likely visible as outcroppings along the buttes flanking the Popoja rivers, both north and south of present-day Hudson. The local newspapers started reporting on mines opening as early as the fall of 1890, with the Gilmore mine holding veins up to 10 feet deep. The newspaper editors at the time fed the speculation, noting that interest in mining the coal was expressed by the Northwestern Railroad, and samples were sent to the Northwestern offices in Chicago. Within that year, there's mention of new mines near the old Gilmore mine, the Gillis mine, and the Roberts mine. By 1891, Lander real estate value was rising due to mining speculation, and the Edwards mine shipped 700 pounds of coal to the rail officials in Chicago. The mining continued into the turn of the century, with coal being moved by horse and wagon to Lander and Riverton for domestic use, and hauled by wagon to the nearest railroad station. After the turn of the century in the early 1900s, the railroad arrived just west of Shoshone, Wyoming, and was slated to arrive in Lander soon. With the track lines surveyed to pass within blocks of present-day downtown Hudson, public and speculative interest in the homestead lands and the area mines peaked. Jumping ahead to 1905, Daniel and Adelaide Hudson and Emma Rogers released their homestead rights and sold the mineral rights to J.C. Hickey, trustee for the Wyoming and Western Railroad. The Popoja Town Site Company was created in 1906 and purchased around 400 acres of the land that had belonged to Daniel, Adelaide, and Emma. A June 5, 1906, Lander Clipper article reads, J.E. Loy is president, P.A. Ware vice president, O.S. Riggs secretary, and E.C. Leggett treasurer for the Popoja Valley Townsite Company, a corporation that has purchased the Dan Hudson Ranch 10 miles below Lander, and upon which they propose to establish a town this summer. They have several unique features connected with the sale of their lots, which they will sell for $15 each. Reserve 4 lots, only upon which saloons will be permitted to run. Other lots will be reserved for school and church purposes. A certificate of purchase is given upon the payment of $10, and the balance of $5 is due when the deed to the property is ready. A company town was born. The area at that time was named Alta by European settlers, a name they borrowed from the Native American Sioux, meaning high water. The United States Postal Service put an end to the use of the name Alta as there was another Alta within the state. The second name of Rogersville was selected in honor of George and Emma, but again, the Postal Service denied them. So the new town became Hudson after Emma and Daniel's side of the family. On July 13, 1906, Emma, Daniel, Adelaide, and the Popoja Valley Townsite Company set aside and platted the original town of Hudson with streets and alleys dedicated to the public. By September of 1906, full-page newspaper ads promoted the Popoja Valley Townsite Company's new town of Hudson, with a grand distribution of lots at Hudson on the 29th of that month. Also in 1906, the Barber Cross Irrigation Company filed on a reservoir site near the then town of Milford with plans to tunnel through the Coal Hills south of Hudson and offer Hudson area residents the ability to water up to 20,000 acres of dry land. The project was promoted as a tributary to the town of Hudson, which only needs water and intelligent industry to become a vital location in the county. No other mention of the company appears after 1906. But with the word flowing, the railroad creating ease of travel, and no doubt some boasting, the development of the town of Hudson was in full swing by 1907. H.O. Barber, the promoter responsible for most of Hudson's coal mine development while he was living in Shoshone, relocated to Hudson. He lived at that time in a tent house on the south bank of the Popoja River, just north of the railroad bridge. In later years, he lived off Main Street on First, and then up to Indiana Avenue. By the 1920s, he had a mansion in Lander, which he lived in during the boom times of the mines. In late 1907, H.O. Barber published the following in a Lander newspaper. Coal mines in Hudson will soon furnish coal for a large territory. Costly improvements put in have increased output and will result in a considerable reduction in prices. Manager H.O. Barber of Hudson Coal Company was in the city Thursday and is very pleased with the way the market is opening up. A solid train load, the first to leave central Wyoming, was shipped this week to Nebraska and the Black Hills. The Northwestern Railroad has made a concession in freight rates that has made it possible to ship their coal over as large a territory as they can supply for years to come. The spur to the Indian mine will be completed about the first of the year, and the company expects to have the new tipple completed by that time. In a few months, the mine will employ 200 men. Barber created a company and bought the Indian mine on the hills outside of town. In the fall of 1907, a railroad grade was constructed to the mine, and Barber built a store and lumber yard on the east side of Main Street. In 1908, he contracted with the Updike Lumber Company of Omaha to handle his coal, with the stipulation that they take over the Indian mine store and the lumber yard. In 1909, Barber reorganized and started the Hudson Coal Company, breaking his contract with the Updike Company and taking back the Indian mine. Shortly after, the Indian mine began to fail, so Barber bought a piece of land south of Hudson and started the Popoja Coal Company. When the mine Popoja No. 1 started, the Indian mine was eventually abandoned and the railroad spur that had been recently laid was removed. Around 1910, railroad tracks were laid to Popoja Mine No. 1 and then to Popoja Mine No. 2, which had been a wagon mine started before Hudson was a town. From their start until the 1920s, these two mines ran 3 crew shifts a day. Barber was just one of many running mines in the region. The work was in Hudson, the railroad was here, and so the workers came. The earliest residents of Hudson and the mining camps were a melting pot of ethnicities. Single Welsh, Yugoslavic, Italian, Scottish, French, and Irishmen, and a few families arrived. Mostly, bachelor boarding houses were built in town, and settlements, little towns within themselves, were built at the mine sites. It is said that when the miners came to town, they would often come in groups on foot, singing their native songs as they made their way down the hill to Main Street for business or entertainment. In its heyday, Hudson had a population of about 1,500 people. It was a full-service town with first-class lodging at either the Union or the Hudson Hotel. There were at least 2 fine dining restaurants, a physician, Dr. Rep. Loggle, to aid the ill and injured at the cottage hospital. There was also the Hudson Drugstore for pharmaceuticals, the Farm and Merchants, and the Bank of Hudson. A U.S. post office was also present. There was an active Chamber of Commerce, the local 2680 United Mine Workers of America organization, and the Fraternal Order Hudson Lodge No. 49, IOOF, and the Rebeccas. Schools were established for the townspeople and miners' children with up to 3 years of high school taught. The Miner was the town newspaper. Advertisements showed land agents, at least 2 construction contracting companies, notary publics, 4 saloons, including the Stock Exchange, the Hudson Bar, and the Crescent Saloon, 2 general stores and lumber yards, a livery barn and feed store, a dray business for transport, 2 grocery stores, a butcher shop, as well as a bakery that supplied both Riverton and Lander with goods, a millinery shop to keep the residents in hats, a jewelry store, and 1 or more houses of prostitution, despite an ordinance passed in 1909 prohibiting bawdy houses and houses of prostitution. That being said, rumor is that Hudson once had more houses of ill repute per capita than any other town in Wyoming. Factories in town included a tannery, a cooperative creamery, a brickyard with kiln, and a cement block factory, of which many homes in town still feature. The Hudson Rail Yard was a pedestrian stock and coal hub. It featured a depot, a section house for equipment and tools that employed a boss and crew, a repair track for rail cars, and on the grounds around the station there were corrals, shearing sheds, and dipping vats for sheep and cattle. And not to be overlooked in their importance to the very essence of the town of Hudson, there were 2 large rail access coal mines along with all the smaller mining operations in the area. To keep locals occupied, the town had its own 15-piece Hudson band that entertained at company dance parties in the commercial club. Hudson also had its own theater for live performances and movies called the Opera House. Parades and town celebrations livened the town during the summer months to celebrate national and sometimes international dates of significance. 2 churches were established early, with the Episcopal Hudson Congregational Church and the Catholic Church of Ascension, both having facilities in town. And the Miner newspaper keeping residents informed of happenings at Mount Sinai Congregation, the Jewish temple in Cheyenne. Along with the social activities in town, there were community sporting events. Rodeos, foot races, bucking contests, shooting, and tug-of-war contests with cash prizes were held in conjunction with baseball games. Baseball soon became as mentionable as mining when referring to Hudson, as its teams were often the best in the county. As it was, industrial development, settler expansion, and the heavy need for coal during World War I created the town of Hudson. It was industrial development that led to its loss as a center of activity in Fremont County. At the same time as Hudson was being established, the use of natural gas and diesel engines was being developed. Natural gas pipelines were being run across America, and by the 1940s, the last push to lay pipelines replaced the need for coal for home heating. It was as early as the 1920s that coal-fired engines on locomotives and U.S. military heavy equipment and manufacturing plants were being replaced by diesel engines. As these conversions progressed, there was a sharp decline in production at the mines, and the population began to dwindle. The 1920s was also the era of the boom of private automobile ownership. People's concern shifted from gathering coal for heat and industry to wanting gasoline and smooth roads. The trip between Lander and Riverton no longer needed to include a stop in Hudson to rest your horses and stretch your legs. In 1940, the Rocky Mountain Cigar Company of Hudson, owned by Dan Spillar and producer Irvin Thorpe, closed after producing 500,000 cigars. In 1941, the last coal cars made their way down the mine hills, and it was all left to the ghosts of the men and women who walked singing over the hills. Having lost the town's primary livelihood, all but a few families left the town. Most of the shops closed, and booming Hudson was left to itself to create a new identity. That's it for this episode of the Rediscover the Winds podcast. Next episode will focus on irrigation in the West. Rediscover the Winds, a Wyoming history podcast, is brought to you in part by the Wind River Cultural Centers Foundation. The WRCCF is a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping Fremont County museums preserve our Wyoming and Wind River cultural and natural history by directly supporting the efforts of the Du Bois Museum, the Pioneer Museum in Lander, and the Riverton Museum. To learn more, visit www.windriverccf.com and help us conserve our past while enriching our present. Thank you.